Hello everybody, welcome to the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. Today we are going to explore that area of opportunity and need. And when it comes together between two different communities, what the potential is for both communities to prosper. What I'm talking about is the fact that the fracking industry and oil extraction can benefit from a special kind of sand, and people search the world over for it. The Uintah Basin is very lucky in the fact that some of that very sand happens to be within the boundaries of the state of Utah. That's our topic today. And we're going to start by learning a little bit about Southern red sand. We're joined by Chad Staley, who's the CEO of Southern Red Sands. Tell me a little bit about why the sand in southern Utah is so different and so unique.
Sure. When we talk about commercial sand, it depends on a few factors that make sand a viable source for commercial sand. And there's a lot of sand down here in southern Utah. And so the question is, well, what makes really good commercial sand, specifically as a proppant in the oil and gas industries for fracking? And there's a number of criteria. One of them is sphericity, how spherical the sand is. Another is turbidity, how clean the sand is. But a critical component is how strong the sand is and how much pressure that sand can withstand. And so they call it the K value or the crush value of the sand. And it so happens that the sand here in southern Utah, specifically here in Kane County, has a mix of those criteria that meet the demands for a good proppant sand for the Uintah Basin.
So how big of an impact does this make on the Uintah Basin? I mean, currently the contractors up there are going how far away to find this kind of sand?
The Uintah Basin uses a sand that's called northern white sand, and it comes exclusively out of Wisconsin. And so all of the sand comes in from a Wisconsin play. It's railed in and then trucked into the basin. And the sand that we have down here in Kane County is of a similar quality that they're currently receiving. It's just the logistics are significantly closer.
And a much prettier color.
It's a much prettier color.
What other kind of applications can this kind of sand be used for?
So silica sand can be used in a number of applications, and it really is just about how high the quantity of silica is. So if your silica content is high like we have here, it can be used for glass making, it can be used for solar panels, computer chips, for recreational sand like the sand that you see in your golf courses if you're in the bunker. There's a number of applications that you use, some industrial applications that you would use for sand. The very specific application here that at least primarily we'll use or initially we'll use is as a proppant in the oil and gas industry.
So what goes into setting up a sand producing site? I mean, somebody would think a dump truck and a front end loader is all that you need. Is that the case?
Yeah, the sand itself is pretty much the exact same product that leaves the site. The only difference is it needs to be washed and it needs to be sorted. One of the technical components of the sand that it needs to meet to be within the specifications that the clients want is that it meets a very detailed mesh size. And so you have to get rid of what's called the ultra fines and the ultra heavies to really get that mesh size that you need in the product. And in order to do that, we put it through a washing process and then a drying process to remove all the excess moisture before it's shipped.
Huh. And then that's now what I'm hearing in the washing process is that water becomes pretty critical to that.
Absolutely. Water is a critical resource in this process, and it's a critical resource down here in southern Utah. And that's one of the reasons why we've spent the last 18 months really doing a viability analysis, not only on water, but really all of the infrastructure required. But water is one of those things. If there's not sufficient water, you really can't process the sand. Engineering on these plants are pretty amazing because they use a closed loop system to ensure that you reclaim as much of the water as possible in the process. There's even a small water treatment facility on site that makes sure that that water gets cleaned and it's able to be reused in the process.
Okay. What's the market value of this stuff? Is this highly sought after sand, or is it going to hit the marketplace at an affordable price?
The sand will be the same. It'll be similar pricing as to what the Uintah Basin is currently seeing. We likely will be priced less than what they're currently paying because we don't have as high of the logistics costs, so our delivery costs are reduced. Again, it's not that it's necessarily a higher quality sand. It's not a lower quality sand. It's very similar to the quality they're currently using, and so the pricing will just be an adjustment based off of our reduced logistics costs.
So my last question is, tell me exactly where this is going to go. What kind of property is it sitting on?
Sure. So about 8 miles north of Kanab, off of Highway 89, is a section of SITLA land, state trust lands, that is on an area that they call the Red Knoll. And that will be the location where the plant will be, as well as the initial extraction area for the sand.
Okay, very good. Well, now we know a little bit about what is coming as far as Southern Red Sands goes. We are going to talk about some of the implications, some of the concerns the community has, and some of the answers that Southern Red Sands has to those concerns and questions. We'll be back with a very interesting topic on the county seat in just a minute.
Make your next adventure at Bear Lake. The Bear Lake Valley has something for everyone, all year long. Scenery, skies, water, or wildlife. You'll find what you're looking for at Bear Lake. Bear Lake, where families play year-round.
It's the place where excitement and fun collide. The Juab County Fair in Nephi, Utah, August 3rd through the 10th. Prepare for the extraordinary as we push the limits on excitement at the one county fair that others strive to be, from rodeos to carnival fun. And some tickets are still available to see legendary Texas band Lone Star on August 8th. Special price tickets from $10 to $30 at JuabCountyFair.com. Think you know county fairs? Think again. Juab County Fair, August 3rd through the 10th in Nephi.
Exploring is an innate part of being human. What if there was a place on Earth that explores your sense of touch, sound, breath, sight, all year long? So take your time and make it monumental. San Juan County, Utah's Canyon Country, is the place to explore your sense of adventure.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about the Southern Red Sands project in Kane County. We've had an opportunity to find out a little bit about what the project is and what the product is. Now let's talk about how it fits into the community. Joining us for the conversation is the chair of the Kane County Commission, Lamont Smith, and he joins Chad Staley, who's the CEO of Southern Red Sands, for the conversation. Thank you for joining us for this topic. I would like to know how much concern is coming out of the community about the project. It would seem to me that if you've got an opportunity to bring jobs into a community like Kane County that diversifies the economy, people would be pretty excited about it. Has there been some resistance to this?
Yes, there has been. And I think the biggest cause of the resistance is them really not knowing the real facts. There was some misfacts that was quoted and put in the paper, and it's caused a little bit of problems.
What kind of impact are we looking at as far as positive impacts to the community? What do you envision happening with this? How many jobs is it going to bring? You know, and how much startup cost is there in it? And you know, what kind of economic impact do you think you envision it bringing to the community?
Sure. Well, I think every human endeavor has an impact, whether you're building a home or a hotel, whether you're starting a farm or a ranch or a commercial sand mine, it's going to have an impact. And there's benefits and detriments to those kinds of projects. The benefits that come to the county specifically is employment. We're talking about a facility that initially will hire over 40 individuals that will run the extraction side and the plant operations side. In addition, you'll have a number of individuals that will be responsible to provide trucking, that are contracted individuals that will help us out with trucking and other ancillary services. And so I think that there's some real value adds that will be to the community. I think in answer to your prior question on some of the concerns, one of the big areas that was a concern is water. And we spoke just briefly about that. But water is a big concern. We're in a desert environment, and so the worry about water is a real worry. And it's one of the reasons why we've spent a long time and have commissioned a lot of hydrologists and other experts to be able to advise on the issue is there sufficient water here? Because for our operation, for the amount of money it costs to put this plant here and the infrastructure costs that are associated with it, we want to make sure that we have the water supply here without causing a detrimental impact to the community.
You know, sometimes water becomes a crazy concern because Duchesne County went through the same thing in the very same industry, or at least on the other end of it, with oil. And Newfield was able to, one of their big operators, was able to cut down on the water they were purchasing and by doing their own recycling. Is that part of your model?
That's a lot of it. We do, our reclamation process is over 90% reclamation of the water. We're talking about the actual water usage of the plant that we'll be putting there initially is 400 acre feet. We're talking about operating that's the same amount of water that's used to water 80 acres of alfalfa a year. So the actual water usage really isn't super high because we're able to reclaim so much of it. And we spend millions and millions of dollars on the equipment to ensure that we have a really safe, effective reclamation process.
How does that process work?
So when you wash the sand, it's really a closed loop process. In order to get rid of the ultra fines, you get the sand wet, and then those ultra fines go into cyclones and equipment called hydrosizers, which basically separate it out from the mesh sizes that we need. And then that water is this ultra suspended liquid that we push through our treatment plant to get rid of the sand and then to reuse the water. So really the only waste you have is when the sand goes off of the wet plant, it sits in piles and decants where we reclaim as much of that water as we can with decanting. But obviously there's going to be some evaporation. So
in essence, I may be oversimplifying this, but in essence, if you're looking at the water issue, it's no different than looking at the reservoir just outside of town. There's evaporation happening off that reservoir because it sits outside. And so there's going to be some loss when you create a reservoir, and that's where the loss comes from this process. So
that's a large part of it. The other piece is that it goes to commercial dryers whose sole purpose is to remove excess moisture that has not evaporated into the environment.
So some of it's going to be water vapor going into the air.
That's right.
I want to kind of turn our attention to other impacts on the community. How big is the plant going to be?
So the plant's initial production will be 700,000 tons of sand per year. When you talk about impacts, obviously some of the questions from the community are things like traffic, what the impact on traffic will be. This sand can be hauled using 42-ton trailers or 42-ton trucks, and it allows it, you're looking at like 46, 47 trucks per day annualized that will be leaving the facility. So that's the impact from a traffic perspective. You're really only, if you look at the total number of vehicles that travel along 89, you're talking about a 1.6% increase in traffic and general traffic, and about a 5 to a little over 5% increase in truck traffic.
Okay, explain a 42-ton truck. What is that?
So the trucks that haul, one of the other concerns is air quality. There's a worry that if you're hauling these trucks with sand in it, the sand will be blowing everywhere, and you have issues of silicosis and some of the other things that are really awful that could potentially happen. The trucks, however, that are used in this process are completely enclosed, because once we've taken it through our process, we need to make sure it's not contaminated, and we've spent a lot of effort drying it all the way out, and we need to make sure it remains dry. So the trucks are completely enclosed, typically pneumatic trucks, and then they have a pup trailer in the back. And so you're able to haul 42 tons of sand.
So it's kind of like the coal trucks.
It's very similar to fly ash trucks. It's probably a closer, and I think there's a lot of fly ash trucks that come through Canal currently that would be very similar to the trucks that we will operate.
Lamont, I want to address very quickly the impact on the tax base, because this is going to create a new tax base to help county operations, is it not?
Absolutely. If we have new growth and just the wages and the taxes they pay, yeah, it'll enhance our tax base a lot. As far as any expense from the county, there is none. We don't have any
Infrastructure type thing?
We don't. It's the ground is settler ground.
Right.
The only guidance or anything we have to do with it is economic impact or conditional use permit. They had to go through and meet the criteria of the conditional use permit, and they've done that. They've done it from even everything we've asked. They have produced, they have the air quality, they have the size restrictions. I think they've completed all that we've required.
So another question that I would like to ask, actually, let's take a commercial break. We've kind of gone long here. We'll be right back on the County Seat in just a minute.
Make your next adventure at Bear Lake. The Bear Lake Valley has something for everyone, all year long. Scenery, skies, water, or wildlife. You'll find what you're looking for at Bear Lake. Bear Lake, where families play year-round.
I promised my son that if he got straight A's, we would take a guy's trip, just the two of us. We were riding on a trail outside a place called Minersville, Utah. There was so much to explore, and the trail just kept climbing higher, right to the top of a mountain called Jack's Peak. We just stood there with the whole world below us, not saying much. In fact, not a word. Later, my son turned to me and said, "I love you, Dad." Suddenly, I realized we weren't just camping, we were connecting.
Welcome back to the County Seat. We are talking about fracking sand, and that just sounds a little naughty, but actually it is a very viable substance. I want to talk about distribution. There's some concern, I'm sure, that people have raised or might raise that, well, this is great, and we're just coming into potentially a boom cycle in the Uintah Basin, and this will become a dependent industry that is supplying them, and then when it goes bust, then it's like a sawmill and it closes up. Do you have other markets to target for this?
Yeah, I think that, I guess, to begin with a comment on the Uintah Basin specifically, it's oil and gas, and so there is that boom and bust cycle. The Uintah Basin's been a little bit unique in its ability to be somewhat sheltered from that boom and bust. The booms haven't been huge, and the busts haven't been massive either, because of maybe some of the restrictions that exist in that Uintah Basin itself on getting the oil out, as well as the Salt Lake City refineries that exist and their capacity. So we anticipate that until somebody figures out a process to be able to offload the oil in a more efficient way, either by rail or by pipeline, the Uintah Basin is probably not going to have significant growth from where it's at today, but we also don't think it's going to be significantly affected in a downturn. But again, it's oil and gas, and so you always have to be prepared for what happens when and if that were to happen. There's another basin called the San Juan Basin that's in Farmington, New Mexico, that currently isn't an active basin because it's primarily a natural gas basin, and natural gas isn't a heavy play right now, but that's a basin that could potentially use this sand, and it's within the kind of an area from a logistics perspective that could make sense. There's also the ability to put it on rail either in Price or in Cedar City and take the sand out to other markets from that point, depending on what the industry looks like. There's not a lot of sand that's in the western United States, so any application that requires commercial sand would be a viable potential client for us for our commercial sand.
Lamont, a question for you. How hard is it to find an opportunity like this in a rural county like Kane County?
We are tourist oriented, and we really concentrate on tourism. When something comes along like this, the old people do not want to see the change. They're worried about the water. But this industry would just really help Kane County. We can't say we're for it or against it because we have nothing to do with it as far as the county goes. But me personally, I see an opportunity to bring our kids back, to have good jobs, family sustaining jobs, and it's just a big growth for this county.
So people watching on the Wasatch Front will look at this and they'll go, okay, I don't get that. I mean, what are you talking, 40, 50, 60 jobs? That's not, is that a big impact on a county like Kane County?
That's a very big impact, especially if they're family sustaining jobs. We have a lot of jobs which are in our hotels and fast foods and really low paying jobs. One that will help a family come back and live their life, raise their kids here. That's what we look for. And the reason I kind of myself am for this, it's up between two towns. It's not close to any towns. Most of the traffic is going to go north. It won't come through Kanab. I live north. I see trucks go by, and I don't think this is going to affect our travel or anything else. So I'm for it. I really am.
So last question we're going to save for after our final break. We're going to take one more commercial break. I do want to come back and address the geological impacts of the county and the community and the time frame of this project. We'll be right back with the County Seat with some final thoughts.
I've been in Cache Valley for 20 years or so. My two partners are homegrown Cache Valley natives. And so we started the company here because this was home. We like it here. The mountains are near, the weather's not so bad, and the people here are great, and we have a good base of employees to draw on. We recruit engineers out of Utah State University. They're tickled that they have an opportunity to make an engineering wage and stay here in Cache Valley. We're a contract design and manufacturing firm. We serve the medical device industry, primarily the area of orthopedics. We do implants, instruments, that sort of stuff. We've taken advantage of the Rural Fast Track program, and we've used it to help expand our facility. We put in an inspection room, bought a new piece of equipment, and then we've also been able to hire some more people because of it. The programs like this allow us to expand so we can hire more high salary positions. If we can pay people more money, they get to spend it in the valley, and it helps other business. So basically it really helps economic growth of the valley. When I first heard about this, I thought it was too good to be true. The more I looked into it, the more I discovered that it really is a no-brainer. If you have hopes of expanding your business, whether it's with employees or equipment or facilities, you got to look into this. You have to apply for it. The program invests in us, it invests in the valley, it invests in the community.
It's the place where excitement and fun collide. The Juab County Fair in Nephi, Utah, August 3rd through the 10th. Prepare for the extraordinary as we push the limits on excitement at the one county fair that others strive to be, from rodeos to carnival fun. And some tickets are still available to see legendary Texas band Lone Star on August 8th. Special price tickets from $10 to $30 at JewabCountyFair.com. Think you know county fairs? Think again. Jewab County Fair, August 3rd through the 10th in Nephi.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about a potential project that is being considered in Kane County to develop some of the unique sands out here for purposes of fracking. Chad, you've been kind of heavy on this. Lamont is not seeming to mind all this traffic going your direction, but I do have a couple of other questions for you. You know, people say a sand plant and they think of a big smokestack and a tower and all this equipment and tons of stuff billowing into the air. And so the area looks different when you're done. How much impact will this have over a time period on the geological footprint of that section?
The plant and the initial extraction area will encompass less than 100 acres. The plant itself is relatively small and it's relatively basic, but it does sprawl a little bit in its footprint because of the piles of sand that we have, and it transitions from a wet plant to a dry plant and our water treatment processing facilities. And so the actual footprint from the plant is a fixed footprint. The plant doesn't expand significantly over time. But the extraction area is really where people are most concerned. What's going to happen once we extract the sand? What will it look like afterwards? And our process and our lease with Sittler requires us to reclaim that land as we extract. So unlike other mineral extraction processes, we have no overburden. It is the product is just sitting there at the surface, and so we're able to extract and then slowly move along the process. And as we move, we're able to reclaim that land behind us. And so whatever sand doesn't meet the sizing criteria goes back into where we've just extracted. We're able to recontour the land. It will be a lower elevation because we've removed sand. And then we use the BLM's reclamation plan, which is to plant specific native grasses, and they're actually trying to get rid of some of the plants that are currently there as it stands, and so we're going to reclaim to the standards that they would like us.
So in essence, if this comes to fruition, the land's going to be better as far as the grazing or the vegetation than when you started?
Yeah, the BLM's spending millions of dollars today in order to get rid of, there's a hawk that's eating a sage grouse, and they need a lot of those trees that are over 4 feet tall to be removed. And so the BLM has spent in a similar area millions of dollars in order to try to reclaim that land back to kind of a meadow land feel, and that's the process that we'll follow as well.
Excellent, excellent. Any final thoughts about this? Where are we in the project?
We're excited about the project. We think that there's a lot of potential in this project. We've spent 18 months in viability analysis. We are looking forward to continue to look at its viability, long-term viability going forward. For us, a project really has to meet 3 criteria for us to pull the trigger on it. One is it has to be economically viable, and it has to pencil out. The second, it has to be environmentally viable and sustainable. And then the third, it has to be socially sustainable. And as we've gone through these processes over the course of the last few weeks, we've been able to move that needle significantly, but there's still work to be done, and we're excited to go through that process.
Excellent. Well, I hope this conversation helps answer some more of those questions. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to join us for the county seat. Remember, local government is where your life happens. These decisions have impacts. They are real. Please share this with your friends and tune in each week to find out more about local government on the county seat. We'll see you next week.